Welcome back. So today we are starting a new little series. It's at least going to last for this week. Maybe we'll make more of them in the future when there's another event, but we're going to look at the most degenerate ways that you can get your grind done in an event as quick as possible. So if you've got any suggestions for absolute degenerate gameplay, be sure to leave them down below, and if they seem like they have potential, I will look into running them. I'm pretty much done with this current event, but I can probably get a few more days out of it if I really need to. But starting with today, we are looking at tanks. Now, what is so degenerate about tanks, you might ask yourself? Well, on a normal lineup, honestly, nothing. There's nothing particularly wrong with playing tanks. There are certain BRs where it can become a problem. I don't think that I played at one of those BRs, and that was kind of intentional. When I was putting this together, or I thought up the idea, I wanted to try some of the more scummy playstyles, but I didn't actually want to, full commit to them. So, in theory, you could run, BR5 Germany, and you could run the Tiger 2H, the Tiger 2P, and the Yak Panther. And admittedly, I've done that before, but I don't really like doing it, so usually I'll throw all three of them on the lineup, and I'll play one of them for one spawn in the game. For this playthrough, for this playstyle, what I wanted to do was play nothing but tanks. So basically, this only will work if you have invested in some squad slots. It's not something that a free-to-play player can do. So that's strike number one towards degeneracy with it. Basically, you need to run at least 3 tank spawns, and then you can fill out your remaining slots with whatever you want. So, in my instance, I played BR2 Germany. Like I said, there are probably better options, but this is what I went with. And to be fair, it was degenerate enough as it is. So I went with the Panzer IV with the short 75. I have the premium one. You could have used the non-premium one. It would make a slight difference, but it's not a colossal difference. The Panzer IIIN from Stalingrad, and the premium Panzer IIIN. But, like I said, there are alternatives. You could run pretty much anything with a short 75, so the Panzer IIIN from Normandy would work, the Tech Tree Panzer IV-E would work, the Panzer IV F1 would work. I actually considered putting the Panzer III J1 on, because it's got the longer gun, and I thought about putting on the Puma for the same reason. I think if you're running a lineup where you don't have access to 75mm heat shells, then I think you should run one of them with the 50mm gun, because you're going to be able to deal with enemy tanks better. But assuming that you have the same tanks as me, there's no real reason to run one of the 50mm tanks. You do get better pen with them. They're going to be a little bit more consistent at engaging enemy armor, but it doesn't matter with this playstyle, because essentially what you're doing is you're spawning a tank, you're going to go out, you're going to cause as much damage as you can, and eventually if you die, then 10 seconds later, you're going to spawn in the next one. And if you die, 10 seconds later, you're going to spawn in the next one. And if you die, 10 seconds later, you're going to spawn in the next one. And if you die, 10 seconds later, you're going to spawn in the next one. And on, and on, and on, and on, and on. Now, I think I tested each of the degenerate playstyles that I went with, like 3 or 4 games each. And some of them were more effective than others, but we'll go over all of them after I get everything put together for each of them individually. For the tanks, it is kind of dependent on how aggressive the other team is at taking you out. But like you'll see in the video that I decided to use for today, it ultimately doesn't matter. So, the game that I'm highlighting today was a game that we lost. And I think at the end of the game I had something like 8,000 points. So, what that effectively says is, as long as you are persistent, and you keep spawning a tank, and you keep blowing up enemy infantry, and you keep blowing up enemy tanks, yes, the other team may outperform you, because they're actually on objectives and you aren't. Sure, your teammates may all be bots, but when you're playing an event, it doesn't matter if you win. All that matters is how much score you get. And to that purpose, I think this works fine. Now, bear in mind, there are games that I had where I only had, say, 4,000, 5,000 points. I could have gotten 4,000 or 5,000 points just running around normally with a normal lineup. But if you're short on time, or if you don't feel like playing the event, you're burnt out or whatever, I think this is a pretty good playstyle, because it allows you to take an I don't care mentality, where it doesn't matter how your team does, doesn't matter what the enemy team's doing, you sit there, you tank, you big, tough, steel monster, and you kill. And that's the thing. The short 75, whether it's with HE or with heat, it kills infantry very, very well. I think the majority of the games that I played like this, I won. And as far as how degenerate the playstyle is, I think the way that you can kind of rank that is, number one, this is something that you can only do if you've bought into the game. So, there's a point to degeneracy there. Number two, your tank has 2 tank slots. You're going to take up one of them the entire game, and there's a very good chance that you're going to get that slot every time you spawn, because you have like a 9 or 10 second window between your deaths for somebody else to also be dead at the same time, and also want to spawn in a tank, and also click on it and spawn before you. So, I think there's like half a point there, maybe a whole point, but because you do have 2 tank slots, somebody else on your team is always going to be able to spawn in a vehicle if they want to, but at the same time, you are taking up one of these slots for the entire game. And I think that's kind of where your degeneracy points cap out, so you only have 1.5, 2 maybe, because depending on your BR, I suppose, depending on the BR that you choose to do it at, and depending on the nation you do it as, you might have half a point, or you might not, and it really just comes down to how much of a pain in the ass is it to deal with you. If you're playing BR, to be honest, you're just as easy to deal with as everybody else. Arguably, you're a little bit tougher because infantry probably aren't going to take you out if you're in the Tiger 2H specifically, so you have a point if you're there. If you're playing Russia at any BR, then you can get killed by anything. If you're playing America at any BR, you can pretty much anything. If you're playing Germany at BR2 or BR3, you can pretty much get killed by anything. Now, I do think that there are some nations that this favors more than others. Again, BR dependent. If you look at BR 1 and 2 Germany, they're very, very good at doing this at that BR because they get access to the short 75. And the short 75 has an absolutely nutty fire rate. I don't know off the top of my head what it is, and there's no way for me to see fire rate in-game just by looking at the tank. This isn't War Thunder, but it is very, very fast. It is unbelievably fast for a 75 mil gun. And basically what your shortcomings are in one of these tanks, number one, you have kind of a low velocity gun, so your shell's not the quickest. Number two, you have a short-barreled howitzer, your pen kind of sucks. Now, if you have the premium tank, the Panzer IV-E, or if you have the pseudo-premium tank with the Stalingrad Panzer III-N, that's kind of a non-issue because you have heat, and your heat can pretty much go through everything that you see. There are limitations. Grants and Lees, depending on the angle that they're at, can sometimes tank your shots, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure you can get your normal AP shot through them if you hit them in the right place. So, it's kind of neither here nor there. If you're stuck with the HE shell, believe it or not, the 75mm HE actually will blow up a lot of the tanks that you run into, even though it's not an AP shell. So I think you're still doing alright, but that's also why I said you might consider putting a 50mm gun on. And the thing is, depending on how degenerate you want to be, you can enhance this lineup with other things. So, for example, you could bring 4 tanks and have your 4th tank be your AT tank, so if the other team's just spawning lots of tanks, you bring in one to counter them. That's an option. On top of that, if you really want to min-max your points, what you could do is spawn your first spawn as an engineer, build an engineer point, die, spawn your second spawn as an APC, park your APC, die, spawn your third spawn as a tank, play tank for the rest of the game. Because now you're going to be farming your points from spawns with your APC, spawns with your spawn point, maybe you even threw down like an ammo box, and maybe you're getting points from that too. And now you have your tank where you can just farm infantry. And you can pretty reliably get some tremendously high kill games in these tanks. And on top of that, you have to remember, vehicle kills count for a boatload of points. So every time you see another tank and you blow it up, you're getting a bunch of bonus points. On top of that, it's not particularly hard. Like, the barrier to entry to doing this is essentially, do you have the situational awareness to keep people from sneaking up on you? And can you aim the gun? That's it. And aiming the gun isn't even, like, a requirement. As long as you can hit near them, the HE shells will most of the time kill them, and the heat shells will certainly kill them, because the blast radius against infantry on the heat shells is absolutely absurd. On top of that, you have MG34s, which are, yeah, they're pretty decent machine guns. They have a decent amount of time that you can fire them, and they have a very good fire rate. They do overheat more than some other nations, but, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, on top of that, you can throw, say, a fighter and an attack plane on your lineup if you really want to. So then, if the enemy starts spamming planes at you to the point where you just can't get out of your spawn fighter, shoot down their planes. Other than that, there were definitely games where I had absolutely no issue just spawning in my first spawn as the tank and just cycling through it for the whole game. Now, if I was playing, say, Russia at lower BR, I think this might be a little bit more difficult, but I think that's in part because their lower tier tanks are not very good. They have enough options. Like, the T-28s, I think, effectively fill the same role, in that they have 75s and they can probably deal with infantry well, and then I think you couple that with the T-50, because it's got decent armor, and it's got a pair of machine guns, and the 45mm does alright. If you're playing America, the Lee, the Grant, and the Scott, or the Crusader, or the Flamethrower Stuart, you actually have some really good options to do this with the Americans. The Flamethrower Stuart you have to play pretty aggressively with, but because of that it's really fun. It's like a go-kart with a flamethrower. I love it. With the M8 Scott, you're getting the same kind of firepower as you get with the German lineup, but you're not getting the armor, so, you know, take that at your own risk. And honestly, I think the Lee and the Grant are better than the German options here, but that's mostly because their armor is just so good. The problem with them is that you need very specific crews for them, and you need that crew to be fully fleshed out. You need it to be like a 6 or 7 man crew. I forgot exactly how many people go in that tank, but it's a lot. The Crusader, I think, is kind of the happy medium then, in that it's relatively quick, it's got a decent gun, and it also has a very small crew. And then, looking at Japan, all the Japanese low-tier tanks are bad. The Ho-Ai is actually pretty good. So you could take the Ho-Ai, you could take the Ho-Ni. If you've got the premium Chi-Ha, then you could take that. That's actually a very, very good tank. So you could make a lineup with that. Maybe you could take the premium Chi-He. I don't know if it... I think it gets HE. If it gets HE, then you could take that one, but... The Ho-Ni I, or the Ho-Ni 1 or the Ho-Ni I, and the Ho-Ai, those two are fine, and the Chi-Ha is fantastic. So you actually could probably do a decent lineup with them. The only real downside here is that the Ho-Ni I or the Ho-Ni 1 is open-topped, and your crew's gonna get obliterated. But for the Ho-Ai and the Chi-Ha, they're gonna do just fine. And the Chi-Ha has heat, so woe be Americans who stand in front of your tank. I've seen my friends use the Chi-Ha, and it's absolutely devastating. For higher BR, I feel like you can pretty much use anything for anybody. The standout choices are obviously going to be the Tiger 2s, the Tiger 1s. The Panzer 4s and the Panthers are probably fine. The Chi-Ha shotgun and the Chi-Nu will do pretty well. The Chi-Ha shotgun's pretty phenomenal. For the Americans, if you're strictly trying to deal with infantry, the M4A3 105 is awesome, and the Jumbo is a very close second. If it's me, I don't think anything past the M4A176W is worth a damn. And to be honest, I don't think most of the American tanks are worth a damn. The M4A3 105 is awesome, the Jumbo's awesome, the M4A176W, because it's BR4, is cool, but the M4A276W, it has no business being a BR5 tank, and the M18 has no business being a BR5 tank. As far as Russia, as long as you can deal with the reload, the IS-2s are fine. If you are interested, check out my previous video comparing the IS-1 and the IS-2. I think the IS-1 is generally better, but if you play the IS-2 right, it can do work. It's also a really fun tank, to be honest. Even though the IS-1 is probably the more effective tank, I do still play the IS-2 a lot just because I like having a big-ass gun that go boom. But the T-34s across the board and the KV-1 are fine. They'll all do the job. So, I'm going to leave you with the rest of the footage here. Let me know down below if you have any suggestions for peak degeneracy. I have a few more ideas of what I'm going to throw into this. And like I said, at the end, I think I'm going to go over all of the methods that I've looked at and see what the most effective is, and we'll probably crown one the most effective, and we'll probably crown another one the most degenerate. Right now, as far as things that you can do in the game, I think that this one's a little bit scummy, but at the same time, I also don't think it's that degenerate, because I think dealing with tanks is really easy, and I guess the counterpoint to this that I didn't mention earlier is if the other team is killing you, you're just feeding them points, so you're making somebody else's day. If there's a dude on the other team who has an AT gun or he has a good AT squad, or he's really good at dropping bombs with his plane, he's going to have a heyday, and he's going to get his challenge done in no time. Of course, if the other team doesn't show up and you're just farming them for kills, then this is awesome. And to be fair, I understand there are almost certainly some players who play this game and are just absolute tank enjoyers. And I'm sure that there are people that normally play this game that throw 3 or 4 tanks on their lineup and just rotate through them. I mean, I usually run multiple assault squads because I like playing up in people's face. I don't see any reason why there wouldn't be somebody else out there who is like Bob the Builder and only plays engineer squads, or somebody else out there who just loves tanks and plays nothing but tanks. So, it is what it is. Let me know what you think down below. As per usual, get out there, kick ass, take names, win your games, and look forward to seeing more peak degeneracy.
company.